So, Robert, perhaps we could start by telling me a little bit about your role in the company and what your company does in general.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I started this company in 1999 with a business partner of mine after having a series of experiences within the cell therapy industry before there was something called the cell therapy industry. I was pretty lucky to fall into the industry until about 1986, right out of graduate school, with a small company that was looking to grow bone marrow in tissue culture to help patients who had bone marrow transplant requirements but didn't have the proper bone marrow to do the transplant with. That experience led to, oddly enough, and it's a long story for some other time, the development of a skin product called Dermagraft, which was out on the market as one of the first cell type products on the market, in addition to cartilage products that were coming out from Genzyme. At that time, there was no regulatory environment, there was no name for the industry, there really was no industry per se, but there were a bunch of very interesting and interested people who felt that you could take cells and turn them into therapy of some sort. These products were getting approved as devices. There wasn't really a cell therapy track that was being built, but my business partner and I recognized in the mid-1990s that there would be a role for people who had some experience in the industry, him being a physician who was involved in bone marrow transplant work and understanding not just the science of the medical innovations that were happening in the bone marrow transplant realm, but also the business. As a physician, he was operating a group within a hospital. So he had to learn how to get reimbursed for these products and the like. So together with my process development experience and with the experience from having this skin product that morphed into something that got approved, and his experience, we got together and said, we could put something together that could help this burgeoning industry. So we started the company in 1999 as a contract development and manufacturing company to help universities and small companies that were getting in the industry get them started with manufacturing services. That developed into a very sophisticated company that's now owned by Hitachi Chemical Corporation. We're now over about 250 people or so, but we're part of this very large organization that enables us to realize our vision. The platform that we've set up now is a global platform. We have facilities in the United States, we have a facility in Tokyo, actually in Yokohama, right outside of Yokohama, and we've tied those together with a single quality system, a single business system. That together creates the basis for our platform, and sitting on top of that globally aligned, harmonized platform is a service delivery framework that allows us to add technology and to add a single feel for clients in the space today that can take their products from any one geography and move them in any place around the world.
Okay, so clearly that's been a very dramatic and steep journey, and you've gone a long way. Some of the things that I've heard today, a few people have talked about this sector being at an inflection point. Do you think that's the case?
No, it's absolutely the case. It's absolutely the case. One of the roles that I've had the good fortune to play as chairman of the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, which is an industry group it's an international organization. It's predominantly North American, but it's got an enormous European component as well, and relationships and partnerships with other groups around the world that are looking at the commercialization of this industry. For those of us who had the good fortune of being part of this for a long time, had dreams that we would be able to take cells and give them to people, but with those dreams, the only thing that was missing was any experience in making something like that happen. And we saw this as something that was happening at a lab level, if you will. It was at a manufacturing level, it was at a clinical testing level, it was in a testing of the products and releasing them. We didn't understand the full panoply of expertise that you would require in order to actually make something like this happen. Over the course of the last 10 years or so, that has begun to happen, and what's really changed the industry is completely clinically transformative results now, particularly coming out of the immunotherapy space with these exciting CAR T products. there's no doubt that the inflection point that we imagined would happen in the early 2000s, in the next decade, it's certainly happening now toward the end of this decade, where the acceleration is palpable.
And so clearly there's a lot of progress, but are there still some significant barriers to be overcome, do you think?
Well, it's interesting that the barrier that we had before, barriers were reimbursement barriers. There were barriers on the science side, so there were financial, there was science, medical, so manufacturing barriers. Within each of those streams, there are still barriers. But we've moved the ball forward on all of those. There's a fellow who's become a very good industry colleague. His name is Nir Namrati. He now works for a company called Intrexon. And he once said to me that, yeah, there are challenges in this industry that are unique to this industry. But like all industries before us, the solutions will form along the lines of the challenges that are presented. And that's exactly what's happening. So are there challenges? Absolutely. We have not yet figured out from the manufacturing side how to create these products in a high quality, robust, scalable, sustainable way that has a reasonable cost of goods. And that has been our challenge for a number of years. But given the fact that now we've got these clinical results that have just catapulted the field forward the way they've catapulted them, we find ourselves, those of us on the manufacturing and development side, playing a game of catch-up. And we've got to figure out how to make reasonable cost of goods, but hit those quality, robustness, scalability, and sustainability metrics that will actually allow us to create an industry where patients everywhere can receive these products.
And you're confident that those barriers are relatively soluble? You don't see them being insurmountable?
I'm completely convinced that they are. I mean, our company's vision is a world in which these cell-based and advanced therapies are available to patients everywhere. And companies such as ours are putting together the enabling platforms that allow that to happen. And if you look around this meeting hall and meetings like this that happen all over the world today, you can see that the number of enabling technologies, the amount of expertise, the entry of big pharma into the space, the pouring in of capital from the public markets, from venture capital, from private equity firms, the interest in the space is only pushing it forward, and one by one these challenges are being solved as we sit here.
And you're speaking later in the conference in the next couple of days, but is that the theme that you'll be reiterating in the...
That's exactly the theme, and this afternoon I'll be chairing a series of panels on automation and engineering and the role that it's playing in hitting those criteria of cost and quality, scalability, and sustainability. What does that look like now? We all look back at the biologics industry and small molecule industry and we say, yeah, they had some challenges, but they figured it out. Well, what they figured out was it was an engineering challenge at one point, and they were able to solve the upstream problems and the downstream problems. And when they did that, they released the potential of the small molecules of proteins, of antibodies. They released the full potential of those and created an entire biologics industry that helped hundreds of thousands, millions of patients. We're just on that path now, but what is our formula? So we'll be talking about that. And tomorrow I'll be delivering a talk in which it's a perspective talk from having watched the industry and participated on this journey for so many years now, just asking the question, are we asking the right questions? We've asked a series of questions to answer these challenges. Are we on the right path? We have a tendency as an industry to catch on to the next solution and everyone drives towards it, which is okay because it really puts a lot of people power behind solving those challenges. And we just have to continually ask ourselves in this startup environment that we're in, where everything's changing and there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty, are we asking the right question to move this along at the right speed?
And clearly the industry is moving forward and solving a lot of those issues. Who else do we need to bring forward? Do we need to educate the clinical environment and the patients around these therapies as well?
That's all happening. I mean, I think that's why I mentioned before the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine. One of the great things about industry groups that bring in commercial experience is the recognition that all of that is important. And I would venture to say that today, one of the enormous differences to yesterday, and maybe we put yesterday 5 years back, so it's not maybe as though that's 100 years, but is that we did not have all of the different groups represented. This multidisciplinary approach is now complete. And now it's a matter of each one of those doing what it needs to do in a coordinated way to advance us to commercial success, to reach patients everywhere.
So you've been coming to these meetings for a long time.
Yes.
What is it that you look to get out of this particular conference today?
The same. I mean, it's really the same thing. It's where are we? What are people currently thinking? Can we, by having open and frank discussions and asking each other questions, challenging each other on where we are right now, are we asking the right questions, and are we providing solutions to those questions that will not just be me too answers, but will actually change and create this fourth pillar of medicine that we're watching happen?
Going back to the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, clearly you're an advocate for the sector and the industry. Who do you think you need to convince next to really move the sector forward? Is there a governmental or regulator element to that particularly?
You know, everyone seems to be coming along for this ride. I don't know who needs to be convinced next. It's a difficult question. Regulatory environments, as far as the regulators are concerned, they have been our steadfast and sturdy partners since the very, very beginning. And that's regulatory environments all around the world. Government agencies go back and forth depending upon political winds, but I would say that I have been quite pleased with what's been happening from a regulatory standpoint, and that's the governmental regulatory. So the more the Congress and the Senate in the United States, there's some moves sometimes to open up the doors a little bit and allow these medicines to be delivered more on clinic-type basis, but those moves seem to be tempered to the point where we will be able to do good, clean science to prove that what we're doing is right for the right patient groups. Reimbursement, insurance companies and the like have been working with us, CMS have been working with us, and we've actually found a way to reimburse these products. It's not perfect, it needs improvement, but it's something that 2 or 3 years ago was an enormous concern, but now there are reimbursement frameworks. You know, I don't think there's any other frontier that we've got to convince now. We just have to continue to mature in the way we're looking at this from all fronts.
And do you think that pathway is going to be one which is going to continue sort of incrementally, or are we looking to a point where we're accelerating the...
It will have to accelerate. I think the success in the clinics now has brought on this intense interest, as we've mentioned. And with the amount of interest, the number of people, the different therapies, the global reach, all of that is pressuring each one of the groups to get very, very intentional about what they will do next to facilitate the maturation of the industry.
And looking to the future now, what do you think this sector is going to look like in maybe the next 5 to 10 years? How is it going to grow and expand, and what's the impact going to be on patients?
I think the trick will be to find a way to make the therapies a quality and robust production for the right group of patients, for the right cost, in a scalable way that will sustain itself throughout the commercial life of the product. So I envision and have full faith that those elements will all begin to advance and patients will just find it easier to get more durable and more stable cures. So it's going to be just great for patients, and we're creating a great industry around it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.